The broadcast of the regular meeting of the Police Conduct Oversight Commission will now begin.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Cynthia Jackson, and I am the chair of the Police Conduct Oversight Commission, and I'm going to call this meeting for April the 13th to order. As we begin, I'll note that this meeting has remote participation by commissioners and city staff as authorized under Minnesota statutes, sections 13D.021, due to the declared local public health emergency. The city will be recording and posting this meeting to the city's website and YouTube channel as a means of increasing public access and transparency. This meeting is public and subject to the Minnesota Open Meeting Law. At this time, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll so we can verify a quorum for this meeting.
Commissioner Abdi.
Present. Present.
Commissioner Sarah.
Present.
Commissioner Crockett.
Here.
Commissioner Jacobson.
Here.
Commissioner McGuire.
Here.
Commissioner Pino.
Present.
Commissioner Sparks.
Present.
Commissioner Sylvester.
Here.
Chair Jackson.
Present.
There are 9 members present.
Thank you, Ms. Brock. Next, we'll proceed to our agenda, a copy of which has been posted for public access to the city's legislative information management system, which is available at lims.minneapolismn.gov. Prior to our adoption of the agenda this evening, I'd like to recognize City Clerk Casey Carl to explain why the coaching presentation we directed the City Clerk's office to facilitate for this meeting is not on tonight's agenda. Clerk Casey?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And to the members, I want to start by saying we were excited to have a presentation for you tonight in response to the directive adopted at your last meeting dealing with the issue of coaching. And the chair and I, in consultation, decided perhaps it was best to delay that presentation till the next cycle. That was in response to very public comments made by the judge in the Chauvin trial, which said would like to have less public discussions by the city that could have an undue or unintended consequence on the trial. And so in consultation with Chair Jackson, I notified the department heads who were prepared to be here tonight to make that presentation and asked them to clear their calendars for the meeting in May. So that presentation will then carry forward to May. And it's my expectation that we'll have the Chief Human Resources Officer of the city, Patience Ferguson. We'd have our City Attorney, Jim Rauter. And we'll have the Chief of Police, Madere Arredondo, or the Assistant Chief of Police, Henry Halverson, depending on their schedules, who will be in attendance to provide some information about coaching, the use of coaching, how that is applied across the city, and how that applies towards members and officers of the Minneapolis Police Department, specifically in response to a list of concerns that this body has raised over time. So I would expect that that presentation be ready for your May meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Carl. So just to reiterate, that presentation will be postponed to the commissioner's regular meeting in May. That is correct? Just to verify? Okay.
Yes, Madam President, sorry.
Okay. With that, may I have a motion to adopt its agenda?
Madam Chair?
Yes, sir.
If I would, could I please request the admission of a document that is relative to the audit committee's work of business, of which I'll be reporting on later in this evening in new business. It's a document that I've already sent to the clerk and is publicly available later in this meeting.
Yes, but I suggest that we wait until we get to that.
Yes, my apologies. I just need permission to add that to the agenda. Isn't that correct?
Yep. Yes, Madam Chair, he's making a motion to amend the agenda to add a new item of business. And so currently we don't have the order of new business because there was no new business when this agenda was put together. Commissioner Pino has circulated a draft letter that would be up for this body's consideration as new business later on in the agenda. And so that amendment is before you.
So Commissioner Pinot, you would like to make a motion to amend this agenda to include your report?
That is
Yes.
correct.
Okay,
Yes.
so are you so making that motion?
Yes, please.
Okay, do we have a second?
Commissioner Sarah seconds.
Okay, thank you. So that's been, oh, I'm sorry, we need to vote. Can the clerk please call the roll?
Commissioner Abdi,
Aye.
Commissioner Sarah,
Aye.
Commissioner Crockett,
Aye.
Commissioner Jacobson,
Aye.
Commissioner McGuire,
Aye.
Commissioner Pino,
Aye.
Commissioner Sparks,
Aye.
Commissioner Sylvester, Chair Jackson.
Aye.
There are 9 ayes.
All right, thank you. So the motion carries and the agenda is adopted. Next, we'll move on to the acceptance of the meetings. I'm sorry, the minutes from our March 9th meeting. May I have a motion to accept the minutes?
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Pinot. Can I have a second, please?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Jacobson. Clerk, may you please call the roll?
Commissioner Abdi,
Aye.
Commissioner Sarah,
Aye.
Commissioner Sarah,
Aye.
Commissioner Crockett,
Aye.
Commissioner Jacobson,
Aye.
Commissioner McGuire,
Aye.
Commissioner Pino,
Aye.
Commissioner Sparks,
Aye.
Commissioner Sylvester,
Aye.
Chair Jackson.
Aye. Okay,
There
so
are 9 ayes.
thank you. That motion carries and the minutes for the March meeting are accepted. We will now move on to the section of the meeting where we accept public comments. I'll open the floor and invite comments from the community. We will limit public comment period to no more than 2 minutes per speaker. With that, are there any community members on the line who wish to address the commission? I would like to remind anyone who chooses or wants to speak to press *6 to unmute yourself and to state your name for the record. With that, I invite comments from the public. *6 to unmute and state your name, please.
Well, if no one else has a comment, I'll go ahead. My name's Chuck Turchik. I live in Phillips. Madam Chair and Commissioners, 2 quick comments. When the PCOC was first formed, then OPCR Director Michael Brown informed the PCOC Commissioners how the OPCR would be willing to help them perform their audit of summary data function. The result, essentially prescribed by the OPCR, was the 10 case synopses and 3 case summaries each month. In last month's meeting, there was some contention between some of you and OPCR staff about the extent of additional information in the case summaries that some of you felt you should have access to. It's probably a coincidence, and there's probably some logical explanation, but this month, there were quite a few snafus regarding the case synopses and the case summaries you received. 1, you received no new case synopses at all. 2, the case summaries you did receive seemed to contain much less data than they did previously. And 3, none of the case summaries you did receive were any of the 3 you selected from last month's case synopses. This makes fulfilling your audit of summary data function impossible to do. Someone should ask how that happened. My second comment has to do with something that I don't even know if it exists, but I've heard people a lot more knowledgeable than I am mention it, especially during the last year, so I'm assuming it does exist, and that's police culture or the culture of the MPD. What I take it to mean are there informal rules and attitudes and values of the rank and file officers of the MPD that in large part determine how the department functions in the real world. Now, everyone talks about it, but rarely do people try to pin down what it is. That is, how does the department operate in reality? I know you have usually focused on policy recommendations, and I don't mean to diminish those policy suggestions the PCLC has made. They have certainly resulted in some important changes within the MPD. But if official policies are scoffed at or taken lightly by the rank and file officers, or if they're not enforced by MPD management, sometimes they don't mean a whole lot. So I think some entity in this city ought to begin the discussion about what the MPD culture really is. And what better entity is there to do that than the PCOC? I have some suggestions about how to try to get at this seemingly nebulous thing, but I will put them into a future email because they're too long for this 2-minute comment. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that comment, Mr. Churchick. Are there any other members of the public that would like to make a comment? Remember to star 6 to unmute yourself and state your name for the record. I'm inviting any members of the public that are on this public call. If you would like to speak, star 6 to unmute yourself and state your name. Otherwise, we're going to move on. Okay, well, at this point, I would normally say I want to thank all of our speakers, but I would like to thank our one speaker this evening. Thank you for that comment. We'll move on to reports. The audit subcommittee report, the next agenda item is for reports. We do have one report tonight, and that's from our audit subcommittee. And I will recognize Commissioner Pinot, the chair of the audit subcommittee, to present his the audit subcommittee report. Commissioner Pinot.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As the chair mentioned, audit subcommittee had our first meeting of the year, in which it was primarily just to establish a baseline, if you will, understand where we were at, get a little bit of context of what committee work we have done in the past. In order of our agenda, we received ongoing audit updates, most notably hate crime reporting that was brought to our attention by LGBT group in the city back in 2020. That is still ongoing, and we're looking forward to getting that moving along further. We also asked for updates regarding a 311 study that we're doing with the audit, the audit department, and they're really taking the majority of the lead on that, but we still had that as one of our charges last year, so we're still curious in getting more information on that, hopefully in the next meeting. We also just began the initial groundwork for the coaching proposal that was discussed back in 2020 by Commissioner Abigail Serra, of which it was referred to the audit subcommittee. We haven't begun any work on that. We're just asking for both that document as well as the legal opinion from the city attorney's office, which we will look at in more depth at our next meeting. Also, apart from ongoing reports, we established a regular meeting time of 1 p.m. on the 4th Tuesday of every month. So we now have a regular meeting time. And then finally, in our discussion section, we discussed an open letter to the Minneapolis Police Department Police Chief regarding police responses to mass demonstrations of public protests. That is something that we ended up deciding that we would move forward on, and we would draft a letter for consideration later tonight. Reason why we amended the agenda to discuss that in new business. So I'm going to save the details of that letter, just letting you know that is something that we wrote, and we're going to be talking about it later tonight.
Okay.
And with that, Madam Chair, my report is finished, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Am I muted? I cannot tell.
You are not.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Pinot. And are there any questions from other commissioners or discussion on this report? Commissioner Sarah?
Thank you. This is Commissioner Sarah. Commissioner Pinot. I'm just wondering if you could give a little bit more of an update on the trans equity project that was open, because it was opened over a year ago, and I'm just kind of wondering where it's at or what has been gathered.
The short version of the update is that we haven't had we haven't had feedback from Department of Civil Rights staff who are working on it since we weren't able to meet quorum back in 2020. So we're now picking that back up again, essentially. And once we actually hear substantive feedback of the structuring, we were still in the structuring phase, the methodology development phase of that report. And once we get more information back on that, we'd be happy to report it out to the full commission.
Thank you.
Yep, no worries.
Thank you, Commissioner Pinot. Any other questions, remarks from commissioners? Okay, thank you, Commissioner Pinot, again for that report. With that and without objection, I will direct the clerk to receive and file this report. Okay. Next order of business is a presentation that we have this evening by representatives of Knock First Minnesota, a nonpartisan initiative created by the Community Justice Project of the University of St. Thomas School of Law. I'll turn the floor over to our guest for this presentation. After the presentation, we'll have time for questions and discussion. So I'd like to turn this over to John and Sarah.
Hi there. I believe we have a PowerPoint presentation that we sent to the clerk. Perfect. Thank you. So yes, my name is John Tro. I'm a second-year law student at the University of St. Thomas.
And my name is Sarah Murtad. I'm also a second-year law student at the University of St. Thomas. And so, yep, we are an initiative with the Community Justice Project of the University of St. Thomas School of Law. And then it looks like I don't have control, so if you would be willing to switch to the second slide, thank you. Yeah, so Knock First Minnesota started in summer of 2020 in light of the Breonna Taylor shooting. And our mission is that every Minnesotan deserves the chance to answer the door. We're looking at no-knock warrants and how they impact Minneapolis and also Minnesota as a whole. You can switch to the next slide, please. Thank you. Yeah, so I want to go into no-knock warrants and specifically some stories as in Minneapolis, how they've affected Minneapolis before we go more in depth into what a no-knock warrant is. So I want to start first on the night of January 25th, 1989. Police officers received a no-knock warrant, and in the middle of the night, they fired a flash grenade into a home that they believed to be empty. They did this based on a no-knock warrant executed in relation to a drug raid. The grenade that they shot into the house ended up starting a fire, and there was an elderly couple in there, Lillian Weiss and Lloyd Smalley, who had absolutely no relation to the drug activity. They ended up dying when the house caught fire from the flashbang grenade. And And after that, there were really significant protests, marches similar to what we're seeing today. However, the police were never charged or arrested at any point for this incorrect use of a no-knock warrant and at both of their deaths. And then I want to fast forward to another Minneapolis incident. December of 2007, the Kong family incident. Again, 12:30 at night, just a little bit after midnight, police received incorrect information from a single uncollaborated informant about a crime. So at 12:30 at night, police burst into a home where the homeowner, the father of 6 children, all of whom were present in the home, thought his house was being broken into. In response to what he believed to be a burglary, he started shooting at police and fired 2 shots through the bedroom wall. Police were protected by body armor and neither of them was injured. However, they also fired back at the homeowner. Luckily, they missed and no one was injured. However, both of these cases, this case especially, it's really just luck of the draw that no one was injured. There was significant damage to the home. And these 2 cases really illustrate why no-knock warrants are an issue for Minneapolis. If you can go to the next slide, please.
Yeah, so now I'm just going to cover a little bit of the basics of a no-knock warrant. No-knock warrants provide an exception to something called the knock and announce rule for law enforcement. The knock and announce rule is a part of the 4th Amendment and is applicable to all federal and state law enforcement. The rule requires law enforcement to first audibly make their presence known, such as by knocking, announce their status as law enforcement, such as by saying police, announce the purpose of the law enforcement presence, such as by saying search warrant, and then delay for a period sufficient to permit the occupants to reach and open the door. In general, a delay of 30 seconds is sufficient before forced entry is permissible, but it depends on all the circumstances involved, such as if it's at night or not. Next slide, please. All right, so a little more about no-knock warrants. They were first instituted during the Nixon administration's war on drugs. The primary justification for the use of no-knock warrants is that unannounced entry will prevent harm to officers and also prevent the destruction of evidence, because a lot of drug evidence is easily destroyed. Several war on drugs policies incentivize the use of these, specifically by special weapons and tactics units throughout the country. SWAT teams use paramilitary tactics and gear to perform their duties, and they often do perform any forced entry activity, although it is notable that they aren't required to. Any police officer could serve a no-knock warrant, and they don't even need to have any, they could be in plain clothes. Next slide.
Yeah, so there's quite a few different constitutional issues that we run into when we're talking about no-knock warrants. So I want to start with the 4th Amendment. You have a right to privacy in your own home. And so having police officers barge into your home without announcing, without knocking, can really be a violation of that right. Additionally, Minnesota follows the Castle Doctrine that you have a right to self-defense and to defend your home. And so what happens, as in those cases that I mentioned earlier, we have instances where people believe their home is being robbed and they're worried about their safety and the safety of their families, and they act in self-defense, not realizing that it's actually the police barging into their homes. Additionally, when we look at the Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms, we run into issues where as part of their self-defense, they have firearms themselves and are firing at police, not realizing that it's police officers breaking into their home. According to the ACLU report, War Comes Home, minorities are disproportionately the subject of forced entry by law enforcement. We use the ACLU report because there's pretty limited data regarding when no-knock warrants are used in Minneapolis and Minnesota specifically, and that's one of the issues that we keep running into as part of this project. Additionally, we run into issues in the presumption of innocence, looking at the 5th, 6th, and 14th Amendment. The justification behind no-knock warrants assumes that those in the home are going to act violently if they know law enforcement is coming in their home, assumes that they are going to obstruct justice, and takes away any sort of presumption of innocence that they generally would be deemed to have. And so we really run into these constitutional rights with that. Next slide, please. Yeah, and so no-knock warrants they're a hot topic right now around the country. And so different states and different cities are also instigating bans or restrictions. So Florida, Oregon, Utah, and Virginia all have different bans, and Utah also is the only state with mandatory tracking of forced entry by law enforcement. So they are required to track every single no-knock warrant that is executed. Additionally, the list of specific cities that are banning no-knock warrants increases every day, includes Louisville, Memphis, Indianapolis, Topeka, San Antonio, and Houston. However, no-knock warrants are still available to law enforcement in Minneapolis with very few restrictions. We'll get into that. Next slide, please.
Yes. So one thing that people say to me when I bring this up to them in Minneapolis specifically is they say, "Oh, I thought that was taken care of," or they think that no-knock warrants are banned outrightly in Minneapolis. On November 24th, 2020, Minneapolis did publish their first policy regarding the use of no-knock warrants. One of the aspects of this policy was that it labeled unannounced and announced entry search warrants, which was good because then that would make it more easy to find that data. Because one of the issues we would run into when looking for data is that there's no delineation between the search warrants with unannounced entry or announced entry. And so you would literally have to sift through all of the search warrants and find the details regarding the type of entry that was asked for. In regards to this new categorization, we have a data request that's out there seeking information after the policy has been enacted. Next slide, please. So what's the issue with the policy? What does the policy do? On its face, and according to the news releases that were sent regarding it, it seems as though it's an effective ban on no-knock warrants in Minneapolis. Truthfully, that's not the case. It fails to address or limit and regulate warrant use. And overall, we do not know the effect of the policy on the use of unannounced entry in Minneapolis because there's no data available to us at this time. The only data we have available is the stat that was in the policy that said that on average, there's 139 a year done in Minneapolis alone. But we can kind of see what the policy's effect might be on usage by looking at its language. And overall, the effect looks like it's probably going to be minimal. For example, very obviously, the policy does not ban the use of no-knock warrants. Also, the policy does not include additional warrant application requirements for no-knock warrants, or in this case, they're referred to as unannounced entry warrants. The policy does not require the officers executing the no-knock warrant to be in uniform. The policy does not restrict the use of flashbang devices, the very same devices which caused the deaths of Lillian Weiss and Lloyd Smalley in 1989. It is also important to note that the city of Minneapolis recently paid out a $170,000 civil lawsuit to somebody who suffered burns from a flashbang device. That wasn't during a no-knock warrant, but it's just a fact that shows their danger. The policy does not require active body cameras during the execution of unannounced entry. The policy does not limit the use of announced entry to the daytime. A big issue with no-knock warrants and unannounced entry is when it happens in the middle of the night, people are really disoriented. They don't know what's going on. It makes things a lot more difficult for people to understand what's happening, and they may react more violently. The policy does not define exigent circumstances. So with exigent circumstances, police can enter a home without a warrant. Exigent circumstances are basically emergencies. This policy carves out a space for exigent circumstances and using unannounced entry warrants for exigent circumstances. The problem is not every reason is necessarily an exigent circumstance. So the fact that it's not properly defined is a big issue. Another factor that is one that I've recently come to realize is that this policy does not mention the potential presence of children. As described in the 2007 incident, there were 6 children present. That's a lot of trauma. That's a lot of things that can affect that child's development. Seeing loved ones fired upon by police officers. Finally, the policy does not include comprehensive report requirements, transparency measures, or review protocol. Therefore, the policy seems, in our opinion, an ineffective tool at restricting or regulating the use of no-knock warrants. But in order to know the true effect, we need data. And not just us, but everyone. One good thing about the policy, like I said, is it does create two categories of warrants, announced and unannounced, which should help in data collection. I would like to also give credit to Campaign Zero, an organization that helped us in this policy analysis. Next slide, please.
Yeah, so like John said, we did get a success in identifying unannounced and announced entries. However, the issue that we're running into and the issue that we would like to request help with from all of you is trying to get some information on how this is actually working. So what we have done in the past, so the policy went into effect January 2021. We filed a data request February 2021, requesting the number of unannounced and announced entries done, the types of crimes that were used, the racial breakdown of subjects in unannounced entries, the location of unannounced entries by neighborhood. So that way we could get a more comprehensive understanding of how often they're being used. Is there a difference between before the policy and after the policy? Are they still being disproportionately used against, or are they disproportionately being used in minority neighborhoods? As we see nationally, is that the case in Minneapolis as well? However, we have not been able to get this information. We haven't heard back from our data request. We followed up multiple times with the mayor. We were able to get in touch with one of the clerks who said it could be many weeks, but then we weren't able to get an exact time to expect that information. Obviously, this is really important to get this information to see how this policy is helping, or if it's helping, and if it's not helping, what we need to do going forward to change the language, to fix the language, to make sure it's having the effect that it was originally intended. What we would like is the establishment of a monthly audit of forced entry by the Minneapolis Police Department. The audit could be a mandatory report periodically released by the city, stating the number of unannounced entries completed, the number of announced entries completed, types of crimes used for the basis of unannounced entries. We would want that to see, are they really exigent circumstances? Are these emergencies, etc.? The racial breakdown of subjects to unannounced entries, the geographic location of unannounced entries by neighborhood, and a report of entries that either resulted in civilians needing medical care or law enforcement needing medical care. We want these data points because we really believe it'll give the city and its residents a more complete picture of what is going on regarding no-knock warrant usage, a better look at the policy. Residents and law enforcement really deserve to know this data because there is such an inherent danger with unannounced entry, and the potential liability attached to these incidents where things could go wrong is really high. Next slide, please. And so, yeah, now we'd like to open it up, see if there's any questions, comments, suggestions, etc.
And I would also just like to thank the commission for hearing our presentation today. I've been looking forward to presenting to you guys since last fall, and I really appreciate all your service.
I am unmuted. Okay. Commissioner Vice Chair Abdi, I do see your hand. I have a question I want to ask real quick, or maybe it's just a comment, but under the section 9-307, I believe that would be like section 2, paragraph D. The officers should be mindful of any known or reasonably believed barriers or obstacles to cooperation, such as perception barriers. I'd like to cut it off right there. When you are kicking in someone's door in the middle of the night and you have not announced yourself, I think that that should be a reasonably believed barrier to perception, that the officers should automatically carry that with them, that they are waking people up in the middle of the night, and they may not respond the way law enforcement demands that we be compliant and quiet at all times. That really needs to be highlighted and paid attention to. There's a huge problem with this policy, taking that into consideration. I just wanted to get that off my chest. And Vice Chair Abdi, please make your comment, ask your question.
Thank you, Commissioner Jackson. I'm really excited about this. Thank you so much for the presentation. I want to support this initiative like in any way possible that we can in this capacity. And yeah, I'm just really interested to see like more background behind it, because like at a time at night, people are taking medication. Like, you know what, there's just a lot of scenarios that could happen that I definitely want to look into more. Do you guys have maybe like, not like a blueprint, or maybe like an example of like an agency that has done this and like their policy like addresses all these issues, so we can kind of use that for reference?
Yes, we do have model legislation from Campaign Zero that addresses all these issues. And in regards to the creating of an audit, a monthly audit, I don't know if I don't know of any specific to any state or city regarding forced entry. I think it would be a very advantageous thing for a city to have. And I have heard and seen accountability dashboards from other police departments where they describe other use of forces and stuff like that.
I think you're on mute.
Madam President, your microphone is on mute.
Okay, how am I now?
Yep.
There you go.
I don't know why it's always me that has the technology issues. I believe I saw Commissioner Sparks' hand go up first.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I didn't have any additional questions on my end. I just wanted to thank you both for making that presentation. It was really, really good, very concise, very well done. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Commissioner Pinot.
Yeah, thank you both for presenting. And also as a fellow policy person, thank you for giving credit to Campaign Zero with the policy analysis. Awesome to hear that. I have a question regarding your data request. You said that it was initiated in 2021, makes sense from the code. Do you remember the specific date of that request?
You know what? Give me a minute and I can pull it up for you and get you an exact date.
Sure, no worries.
Would you mind while you're doing that if I move on to the next commissioner's comment or question?
That's the only question I have, so.
Okay,
yeah.
Commissioner Sylvester.
Thank you so much, and thank you for this presentation. This is fascinating. Going forward, just a suggestion, maybe in any monthly reporting that we get on this issue, maybe we could include warrants that were served in the city of Minneapolis, regardless of agency. So if we could also see, not only Minneapolis Police, but Hennepin County Sheriff's Department.
Yep.
I know I've, been on standbys as a paramedic. I've been on standbys with outside agencies from different cities that come into Minneapolis looking for people serving warrants in that capacity. So I think it might give us just a much broader picture of who is serving warrants in Minneapolis. And these special types of warrants, just a suggestion.
Thank you for that. Commissioner McGuire.
Thank you again for such a wonderful presentation. I had two questions. One was, did you also mention in your data request, I'm sorry if I missed this, actual arrests made as a result of no-knock warrants? I would like to suggest if we do a monthly audit, just adding that piece as well, seeing what arrests arise out of no-knock warrants. And the second was just more of a policy. In your policy research, I had a question. Have you seen any difference in the protection of civilians' Fourth Amendment rights when it's a city's ordinance banning no-knock warrants versus like a state, something that came out of the state legislature or a judicial ban? That might be too early to tell. I was just wondering if there was any difference in the effectiveness of actually the protection.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. The overarching problem with no-knock warrants is the lack of data. It's very hard to find any data regarding it. I have spoke with Dr. Pete Kraska on the issue last summer and during the fall when I was trying to gather my own data. So at this point, I don't have an answer as far as comparing the effectiveness, but that would definitely be a good research topic. And if there was some sort of monthly or periodic accountability in Minneapolis, I think that would be on the front line of determining that.
Thank you both.
I'd like to just add one more criteria to the data, and that in addition to arrests made, I'd like to know injuries incurred. Oh, my mind just went blank. I'm so sorry, Commissioner Crockett.
Yeah, thank you both for the PowerPoint and the study. Super interesting. Definitely learned a lot. I just have a few questions, and you guys might address it, so I apologize. But I think you mentioned like the body cameras are not required during the no-knock warrant. Is that accurate, or does that go by like state, or what is?
Yeah, so the thing about no-knock warrants in Minnesota as well is there's no statutes regarding no-knock warrants whatsoever. There's only court opinions saying that they're permissible. Regarding the use of body cameras, just within that policy, there is no requirement. There is no requirement for active body cameras within that specific no-knock warrant policy.
Do you know if it's like that for like other states as well, or?
One of the core, I think, nonpartisan policy initiatives regarding no-knock warrants is having active body cameras and having that policy in place, because it does help liability on the police end and just to see what's going on in general.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Abdi.
Yes, I have a question that you guys may have addressed as well. But why isn't there data around like no-knock warrants? Because like you said, that seems to be like the overarching problem with this. So is it like maybe like the misclassification of like the kind of warrant that has something to do with it? Like from your guys' experience and research, what do you guys think?
Yeah, Sarah, do you mind if I address this?
Go for it.
Is that okay? So last summer, I attempted to do my own research regarding just the number of no-knock warrants issued in Minnesota. Each entity I talked to either didn't have the data on hand or they had their own way of tracking it. There is no universal tracking of no-knock warrants. I did contact the courts system several times as well. They didn't have a system for tracking it. I did contact the Department of Public Safety. They didn't have a way of tracking it. I just think it's something that there is no universal tracking. And so it's really hard to get the data. It is possible, but it would take hours of sifting through different warrants. And in bigger cities, that's just a lot to ask of a department.
I think if we're going to have this policy, then we absolutely need to have some sort of mechanism in place to track. That just goes without saying, as far as I'm concerned. Commissioner Pinot, is this something that the audit subcommittee would be effective at taking forward for us to have a monthly audit from the police department, from the MPD or the chief, whoever it needs to come from?
I think that, I mean, to follow the process of PCOC would be to, you're seeing the beginning of it right now, where we have concerned community members who are coming to us with their own research that they've done. And if there is interest from, frankly, any one of our members here, we can have My computer says that the program Teams is crashing. I'm assuming y'all can still hear me.
Yes.
Yep.
Good. That being said, it sounds like there's definitely interest in this. I've heard it from Vice Chair Abdi, and I've already written down a note of wanting to discuss this in the audit subcommittee. As far as the procedure, the mechanisms of this goes, we would frankly start with the inspiration from our presenters here today, and encourage a research and study grounded on our own research, and making sure that there are some avenues where we as PCOC members and an entity housed within the Department of Civil Rights might be able to answer some of these questions in due course. I'm definitely interested in bringing this up in the audit subcommittee. It sounds like there are multiple commissioners here who are interested in taking personal investment into this, kind of leading the charge, if you will. So we can definitely, whether the commission wants to make a formal motion of it for something, some sort of research and study to, be referred to the audit subcommittee, more than happy to have someone make that motion. And it sounds like we're getting such a recommendation from the clerk on that.
Yes. Mr. Carl, yes.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Everything Commissioner Pino says is correct in terms of, I think, the recommended strategy is that with a motion passed by a vote of this body, there would be created a new body of, and forgive me if I'm getting it wrong, Commissioner Pino mentioned it several times, but this body has in its procedures or bylaws a research and study project. Yeah. This is a perfect example of a research and project study. I would also encourage you within that motion, and maybe we can just assume that Commissioner Pino's motion is before the group, which is that this be identified as a subject matter of research and study that would be referred to the audit committee, since he's already said he wants to have it at his next meeting. But I would also encourage you that you would invite the mayor's office and representatives of MPD also to engage in that study, to get input from them on this information and what they're doing now. We've heard really good presentation, and I think that this body as an oversight commission then with that motion, as we've done in the last few months, can then invite, I know that we met recently, Jared Jeffries, the mayor's policy aide on public safety, and so it may be him or perhaps another aide from the mayor's office who is engaged, and also representation from MPD to respond to some of the questions and concerns and to participate with this body through whatever agency it decides to delegate that work to, in bringing forward recommendations to the full body that then could be acted on in terms of setting forth a course of ongoing action.
Okay. Would anybody like to make that motion? If not, I will. That we ask Commissioner Pino to establish a research and study subgroup to the audit subcommittee, and that working with John and Sarah from St. Thomas, the chief, and I'm sorry, I forget who else you said.
Mayor.
Yeah,
the mayor's office. The mayor's office.
That we absolutely make this part of our body of work going forward. Would anybody like to motion that, or make a motion? I do.
Or perhaps second it, since you've made it. You've made it, Madam Chair. Okay. We just need a second.
A second, then. Somebody.
I will second.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
I don't feel right seconding a directive for myself, so sorry.
I know, right? Yeah. I feel the same way sometimes. Like, I don't know whether that's appropriate for me to do or not. But yeah. Okay, thank you, John and Sarah. Absolutely, so much for this presentation. This gives us really something to sink our teeth into, and possibly we can do what we're supposed to do and do some oversight and make some policy change recommendations. Are there any other questions, remarks to John and Sarah before I direct the clerk to receive and file this presentation. Anybody else?
Thank you all for your time, and we really look forward to working with you more.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for bringing this to us. Okay, with that, we will take up unfinished business, and the first item under.
I'm
Excuse
sorry,
me.
Madam Chair.
Sorry.
Lisa, go ahead.
I'm sorry,
Commissioner
Madam Chair,
Dickinson?
we did not
Oh, yeah,
vote on
oh,
the
you're right. I'm sorry, I
referral, and
just got excited.
I'm sorry, I did not catch who seconded that motion.
Commissioner Abdi.
Vice Chair Abdi.
No.
Okay,
And
Also,
I
before,
also,
yep.
I also see that Commissioner Jacobson has her hand raised, so I would give you the opportunity.
I'm sorry. I tried to get it in there quicker.
That's okay.
I was just going to say that what we might also want to include is learning platforms. How are we going to include this in training to make sure that public safety is aware of the changes that are being suggested? You know, how easy will it be to make sure that they are going to, like, is this something that should go to the post board, or is this something that should go to one of the other training mechanisms? I would just suggest maybe throwing that in there and thinking about that, because that's going to be the next question. How do we deploy this information to peace officers? So.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody have a response to that? I think actually if we make a policy change, then the manual would be updated to reflect that, and police officers will be made aware. Okay, so any other comments before? I know I like to move, so I don't want to leave anybody else. Does anybody else have any follow-up before we do move on? Okay, then I think it's safe to say, without objection, I will direct the clerk to receive and file this.
and we still have to take that vote.
My
the
goodness.
roll call on that vote.
I apologize. Mrs. Brock, if you would take the roll.
Commissioner Abdi,
Aye.
Commissioner Sarah,
Aye.
Commissioner Crockett,
Aye.
Commissioner Jacobson,
Aye.
Commissioner McGuire,
Aye.
Commissioner Pinot,
Aye.
Commissioner Sparks,
Aye.
Commissioner Sylvester, Commissioner Sylvester,
Are you on mute?
Chair Jackson.
Aye.
Lisa, I'm sorry, hold up one more minute. Commissioner Sylvester was kicked out of the meeting. He just called back in. So if we can give him a minute to reestablish that connection, I'm pretty sure he'll want to vote on this issue. So can you call his name?
Commissioner Sylvester.
Aye, my apologies.
There are 9 ayes.
All right, thank you, everybody. Again, I apologize for trying to rush ahead. So I think now we're at the time where we can take up unfinished business. And the first item under unfinished business is the presentation of our case summaries. So before we take up the item, I'd like to recognize Mr. Carl for a brief update on this particular item.
Thank you, Madam Chair, again, and to all the commissioners. I first want to express my apologies. During the public comment period, Mr. Turchik rightly noted that there have been problems, not just for this meeting, but most of the meetings we've had at least this year, getting case summaries completed in a timely basis, getting the accurate case summary files to you on an adequate basis where you can make decisions about that. I took the liberty of reaching out to Chair Jackson last week and discuss with her my concerns. And if I can speak for you briefly, Madam Chair, what we discussed is possibly changing the way we've done this before. I think if we can have a way of getting an accurate case list of summaries that we send out to all commissioners between the public meetings, and then petition you to let us know which of those you want. We can then, the clerks, work with the chair to identify those cases that the majority of commissioners have identified. We can send that information back out to commissioners before the meeting so that when the agenda is posted, it's fair and accurate. It has the accurate summaries. The staff is prepared to come and speak to those, and we don't have the back and forth of correcting the list and updating the list and then having these issues that we've been having for the last few months. Certainly that's a change in process, and change is not always easy or smooth, but I'm committed to making that process work. And my suggestion was to the chair that we defer till next month the case summaries that were supposed to be done tonight, and that between now and the next month, we go ahead and pick 3 more summaries so that we're 2 months in. And we have that publicly available, we know it. And then also going forward, we would have much more advanced time between the meetings, because we basically would have May and June all picked and ready before the May agenda is even published. And we would always be 1 full month ahead of time. That way, not only commissioners, but the public, who obviously have an interest in tracking the work of this body, would all have access to that information well in advance of the meetings, not just 48 hours in front of a meeting. So I know that's a change. I know that means we're not ready to deal with those issues tonight. I apologize for that sincerely, but I'd rather give the clerks and the civil rights staff a chance to perfect this system that doesn't seem to work well, and is frustrating for all of you and for staff. And so again, with apologies, that's my recommendation to you, Madam Chair, and to you, commissioners, that we would take this chance to fix this process. And hopefully by May, you'll see a vast improvement and we can carry that forward.
Any comments or discussion about what Mr. Carl has brought? Okay, so
It looks like Commissioner
Chair Jackson,
McGuire.
sorry, I did have one question.
Okay.
I was wondering, as part of the new process, would the list of 10 cases that we are looking at become public as well? Or would it just be the 3 cases that we choose? I was just wondering what's going to be available to the public beyond us in the new process, or is that something we're figuring out?
Well, I think, yeah, I think that in our discussion that the same 10 case summaries will be available to the public, but the commission will choose the 3 that we choose, that we decide that we want to discuss. Isn't that correct? Yes.
Madam Chair, yes, and to Commissioner McGuire's specific question, the list of all 10 optioned or cases that were presented is and would continue to be public data posted with the agenda.
Right.
Thank you.
So basically what we're doing is just suggesting a process change for our case selection. So I'm going to propose that the OPCR staff provide our clerk with the list of case synopses in advance of each regular meeting so that she can distribute that list to commissioners and poll them via smart sheet regarding our selections. I will then coordinate the final selection process as chair with the clerk, and those selections will be posted in the meeting agenda and provided in advance to all commissioners. It's my belief and Clerk Carl's belief that this process change would allow commissioners more time to make their selections, which I strongly agree with, and also to improve our efficiency for how we go about this process. So are there any other questions or discussion? I'm trying to wait to see if a hand pops up on me unexpectedly. Okay, so I want to thank you, my colleagues, and with that, I'd like to postpone.
Commissioner Sylvester does have a question.
Commissioner Sylvester.
No, I'm sorry. I just wanted to say, if you, I trust your leadership on this. This sounds like if you're for this, Chair Jackson, then I'm for this. I think you've convinced me.
Okay, well, thank you. I appreciate that. It was also our clerk, Casey Carl. we put our heads together and decided that something was awry with how we were handling that, and we tried to come up with a better process. So thank you for your vote of confidence. With that, I'd like to postpone our presentation this month of the case summaries to our regular meeting in May. And I will coordinate with the clerk to ensure that we have all adequate, or that we all have adequate access to that information in advance of our meeting. I don't think, no motion, no vote. Okay, so I think we've pretty much discussed our ideas and feelings about postponing those summaries. Okay, so thank you, commissioners. It's been a pleasure. Without objection, I will direct the clerk to make those
Excuse me,
changes. Sir,
Chair-
or ma'am.
Oh, sorry. I was just wanted to remind you, you had some new
We have
business.
some new business, right? Okay, I was just
Oh,
saying,
okay.
without objection, I'd like to direct the clerk to make those changes in the case summary selection process and to postpone tonight's summaries to the May meeting. All right, now we have one final thing on our agenda tonight, some new business, and I'm going to hand that over to Commissioner Pinot to tell us about that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And if the clerk has not already done so, I do believe the commissioners have received the draft letter that is appearing on the screen for public view now. This is an open letter to Police Chief Arredondo regarding the Minneapolis Police Department response to mass demonstrations of public protest. And just a brief background of how this came into being a draft letter. The audit committee had in our first meeting a discussion on wanting to encourage a full, up-to-date and evidence-based understanding of best practices relating to police response to public protests. This was instigated off of a concern that police responses were, as the response says in the first paragraph, hold on, don't move. Anticipation of protests. Yeah, I'm horrible at reading and it'll be too slow, but basically the police response to public protests in 2020 had accusations that police responded in a manner that was unprofessional or questionable by other civilians' viewpoints. This was reported on in Star Tribune and other instances, and it was of concern to us enough that in light of the current trial of former Minneapolis Police Department officer Derek Chauvin, that there may be more demonstrations of public protests and therefore more police responses. And obviously, if the past couple days have not been enough, there have been more reasons as to why there would be public demonstrations and police responses to them. So we, as an audit committee, decided to put together this public letter. I want to be very clear before we go into the letter. This does not in any way have us as the PCOC specifically telling Minneapolis Police Department how to respond, particular strategies. We have not done a study ourselves to be able to have the confidence or evidence to be able to recommend particular things like that. However, we can effectively and quickly encourage Minneapolis Police Department and Chief Arredondo to look at advice and recommendations of academic and experts in the field that have already written on this said topic, not particularly about Minneapolis, but other similar instances, either in recent history or in general, about mass demonstrations. And it was with that sort of spirit in mind, we wrote this letter. To briefly summarize it paragraph by paragraph, essentially it is saying precisely what I kind of mentioned in the very beginning of the first paragraph, and then most notably bringing Chief Arredondo's attention to a 2015 Department of Justice Office of Community-Oriented Policing Services report in which a section of that, and we reference only Chapter 8 of this section, details findings and recommendations for improving responses to protests and mass demonstration for St. Louis County Police Department in response to the shooting of Michael Brown. And we pulled a particular passage from that chapter focusing on what the reporters believe is a softer approach to disorderly crowds, commonly referred to as the Vancouver, Boston, or British model, where officers are in what's defined as soft uniforms, not riot gear, for colloquial terms, and interacting with protesters in a respectful and positive manner. And actually, in this report, they write about how this has a significant impact on how the crowd reacts and responds to officers, even when there are situations that call in that more militaristic response. In addition to that main article that we primarily focus on, we reference a series of peer-reviewed research that get at trying to understand crowd dynamics during mass demonstrations, and we encourage Chief Arredondo to look at these studies and determine for himself, based on his own knowledge or the knowledge of those around him, how well those evidence-based pieces of academic literature might better inform their own strategies in an internal context. And I'll save from reading the exact quotes, but basically it is trying to get at this idea of fair and effective policing really has a indirect methods that already encourage people to comply voluntarily with the law rather than creating an adversarial relationship between law enforcement and those who are protesting. Finally, we added in another piece, particularly because of a number of instances in the Twin Cities where there was use of chemical irritants or what is deemed less than lethal ammunition, such as rubber bullets. We wanted to bring into this sort of conversation, quickly referencing two such academic articles, respectively, on each of those strategies, and more along the lines of their health impacts to people who end up receiving that type of action upon them. That's basically it. Rather than just reading the whole thing to you, I apologize if we didn't go into too much detail on that, but again, feel free to take time, read this, and I'd love to hear what the rest of the commission has to say.
Do we have discussion? Commissioner Sarah?
Thank you. I'd just like to thank Commissioner Pino for putting this together and for your group for putting this together. It's very timely and I appreciate it. I certainly support it, and I would like to offer one personal anecdote, understanding this is not a research and study yet, but just offering a personal anecdote that when police officers shot Dalal Id here in South Minneapolis. I actually live just a few blocks away from where that happened, and there was a demonstration that evening. And I think it's fair to say that everybody was just, it felt like we were all sitting on a powder keg, and the situation could explode at any moment. And officers, you could hear on their radios, the rank and file officers were asking to use their pepper spray, and they were asking to use gas. And I don't know who said no, but from on top, someone said no, and they did not use chemical irritants. And it remained a peaceful evening, and eventually the crowd dispersed and went away. So
yeah.
I understand that's not the thrust of your letter here, but I just wanted to share that since we actually haven't had a chance as a commission to sort of speak about some of those events. Thank you, Commissioner Pino.
Thank you, Commissioner Sarah, for bringing that up. Commissioner Jacobson.
Hi. So I think for me, I would like to, just like Commissioner Sarah, thank you, Commissioner Pino. This was a lot of research, especially if you had to go through everything yourself, pulling out all of the highlights in the article. I think though, for me, I would have to say that I would like to push forward with recommending that Minneapolis looks for some sort of consulting, some sort of advice from professionals in regards to peaceful protesting and how to handle that. But I'm not sure if I can necessarily support it around this specific article because I personally haven't read the article. And I'm not familiar with the experts in the article. So that's something that I feel like we should probably take some time for the rest of us to research more, or at least for myself, before I could say that I'm okay with making these suggestions for this specific article.
Hey, and I totally understand that. That's why I put the footnotes down there. And I even put the URLs. I'm fairly certain all but one is publicly available.
Thank you.
Yeah. And the one that it is, I tried very hard just to pull from the publicly available abstract and dig no deeper into it. So when you do your research, you'll see what it is. But as far as the main portion of that, the Department of Justice COPS program article, that's fully available. And again, because I know there are people who are looking at it and they're probably familiar with the DOJ COPS report. I'm not talking about the one that was in February. I'm talking about the one that is in September. And I'm talking about only Chapter 8 of that report, because that is the one on police response to mass demonstration. If we want to talk about a larger scope of that, we can, but that is not necessarily the subject of this letter.
Would anyone else like to comment? Have a question? If we are finished with discussion on this, Commissioner Pino and Mr. Clark and Ms. Brock, I think I would like to table this until May to give us all an opportunity to go and read the articles and the research that you've done so that we can all be up to speed and on the same page. I think that's a excellent suggestion, Commissioner Jacobson. And Commissioner Sarah, I see your hand.
Thank you. If we table it, I wonder if the group would support in some way notifying the chief that this is happening, so that the chief would have the opportunity to review these sources, or to perhaps he's already read them a million times and he knows them by heart, or just to kind of apprise him of the fact that we're discussing this in May.
Yes. All right, I agree with that. Commissioner Sparks?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo Commissioner Sarah's comments. I think the timeliness here with the trial is really important, and we wanted to get something in front of the mayor right away. So, I mean, if commissioners feel strongly about tabling it, that's fine. But it'd be nice to get something in front of the mayor. If for no other reason,
I will say police chief.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
police chief.
No worries. Yeah.
Thanks for that. No, the timeliness is really important with the trial and everything going on, and what's pretty likely to happen afterwards. So that's kind of a concern.
Okay. All right. I was waiting for my mic to unmute. Commissioner Sylvester.
Thank you so much. Thank you for putting this letter together. I think this issue obviously warrants more discussion and study from us, but in the timely manner that you're putting this forward right now. I think largely just making people aware that there are other resources out there about this issue, and I think that's super valuable right now. I think this is a great piece of the overall discussion, a great addition to the overall discussion right now. And I fully support putting this letter out under our name.
Okay, so I think our consensus is that we want to send something immediately to notify the chief of what we're doing. But then to table the actual, what are we tabling?
Yeah, I mean, if I could, and I totally understand the reservation to want to, if the roles were reversed and someone says, "Hey, I did the research for you, and we want to send this out right now," I would say, "Well, I want to look at the research." So I totally get that. I'm thinking about it from the perspective of reaching out to the police chief, and I'm essentially gonna say in a less formal way, "Hey, look at these," So I'll just put that out there. I am by no means trying to say, just push it through, because I get it. People are going to put their names onto something, so I totally understand. But I am also of the mindset that if we really care enough, and I think it's totally fair to do so, that we want to wait on this, it's okay to wait on it. I mean, we're having a public conversation about it right now. It's very possible that the police chief will hear about this through either a concerned member of our community, or maybe someone on staff already is listening in. I don't know, but this is a public conversation. It's not like we're doing this in a closed room. So I am totally okay if we want to wait on this. Let's just wait on it, and then when everyone feels prepared and comfortable, we'll have a vote. Either that, or we could just have a vote right now, but I don't really want to put anybody in that kind of position of saying, we're voting on this, and if you say no, then you'll get on the letter anyway. That sort of thing feels wrong.
I'm kind of thinking that maybe we do want to send this to the chief's office and then invite him to join us vocally, visibly, for May's meeting, so that we can discuss this further. Then that would give us all the commissioners an opportunity to read the articles, to see what Commissioner Pinot has researched and what he's brought to us tonight. I see your hand up, Mr. Carl.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just following up on your excellent suggestion, as I noted at the beginning, with your approval, this body has agreed that we would postpone the discussion of coaching. And as I noted, both Chief Arredondo and or Assistant Chief Halverson have agreed they would be present. So they'll be at the May meeting. So if it is the commission's consensus that we should submit, and I would label this a draft, Commissioner Pinot, that this is a draft that the body is discussing. It identifies several important issues that they would like to weigh in on in terms of the policy oversight perspective of this body, and we're submitting the draft in advance for your careful consideration. Would like to discuss it with you at the May meeting as an item of business before taking a formal vote that this is the position of the body.
I'm comfortable with that as long as Commissioner Jacobson, who originally brought up that concern, because I don't want to steamroll this in any way. So I would love to hear your opinion, Commissioner Jacobson.
Well, I think that without my vote, you guys would have consensus anyway. So I'm okay with, even if I don't agree, I'm okay with you guys making the decision because you will still have consensus without my vote. So no hard feelings. I'm okay.
Well, then I move to go ahead and notify the chief's office that this is a draft, that this is absolutely what we are considering, and that we would like to continue this discussion with him in our May meeting. So I don't know, Mr. Carl, do I need we do need to take a vote, correct? On whether this is going to be our course of action, or do we do not? Okay.
Madam Chair, I
as
would look
chair,
to,
I am,
yeah,
I'm directing our commission to move forward with this in that way. Do we have anything else? Anybody want to make like a burning desire type comment, question? I think we've had an excellent meeting tonight, you guys. Okay. So with that, we've concluded all the items in our agenda for this meeting. And I will see everyone back here next month for our next regular meeting, which will be May the 11th. And seeing no further business to come before us and without objection, I will declare this meeting adjourned.
thank you, Madam Chair.
All right. Thank you, everyone else. Have a great evening.
Right. Thanks, everyone.
Okay.
Thank you.